Greetings, Rough Riders. I'm Chaplain Bill Dorwart, one of 3 chaplains on board here on the Theodore Roosevelt. It is quite a journey of discovery, a journey discovering the world that we live in, and a journey discovering ourselves. Maybe one of those early discoveries for me, I was in boot camp in San Diego, actually. Today they call it Liberty Station. Now, we didn't consider it that when we were there. It felt more like a prison than a liberty port. But as you know, what boot camp's like. That was 1967, and young farm boy from western Nebraska, uprooted, planted in this barracks with 30-some people in the company. And I just remember, we were pretty miserable, most of us. You know what that's like. And there was this one fellow who was always happy, delighted for where he was and his circumstances, and made the rest of us pretty frustrated and confused. So they told me, they said, well, now he's on the bottom bunk below you, so it's up to you to talk to him about why he's different. And so I approached him and said, why are you so happy? This is a miserable place, boot camp. And he said, miserable, what do you mean? He said, I came from the ghetto, 6 brothers and sisters, had 1 bed for the 3 boys. There were no blanket, no sheets. I never owned my own pair of shoes. It was always hand-me-down shoes and clothes. And here's the first time in my life I've had sheets on a bed. A bed is my own, and brand new shoes on my feet. Of course I'm happy. For this 17-year-old, my eyes were open, that the whole world wasn't my world. Not everybody grew up with the same kind of experience that I did. Eyes opened right there in boot camp. Later on, when I came back to the Navy as a chaplain in the 80s, I felt the same kind of dynamic, this awakening that happened in young sailors as we would be in the Philippines or in Thailand or any place around the world, and we step out and we do what's called community service, ComRail projects. We'd go into an orphanage and paint and clean, play with the children. And I delighted as a chaplain seeing the eyes of the sailors open wide to a world that's so much bigger than their own experience. So often during community service projects, we chaplains will hear sailors say, I got more out of that than I gave. Kind of making a difference is what we hope to do in the world, our sense of mission and purpose. Maybe one example, years ago, back in the 80s, I was on the Midway. A sailor came in to talk about the struggles he was confronting and the decisions that he faced for the future and the trouble he had been in along the way. So I listened, we talked. 12 years later, I was in an airport in Portland, Oregon, and this guy came up to me at the baggage claim, and he says, as you came on that airplane, I thought I recognized you, and I was scratching my head, and were you the chaplain on the Midway? And I said, yes, I was. And he recalled the story of our encounter as he was 18, 19 years old, and he said to me, I'd like to introduce you to my wife and 2 children. It's wonderful how life has unfolded for me. It's this journey that we are on, this discovery. Our eyes are open, and the Navy, I think, helps us do that along the way. I remember as a young sailor, maybe you've experienced this, being on board the Forrestal. I was the only technician, I was an AT, only technician on board that whole ship who had been trained in a particular piece of gear on our aircraft. And we were out like this, doing workups, and all the aircraft came. We had 6 of them. And they were testing things, and they went flying and came back and said, not one of those is working. They bring them down to the bench and they say, you have to fix this. And I struggled and I worked at it, and we put them back in the aircraft. They fly. It's not working. This went on for a couple of times, and everybody standing over my shoulder, chiefs and division officers and XO, all of the squadron, pressure. I knew that my Navy days were over. I was going to end up on the brig because this equipment didn't work. It was all on me. And there was this crusty old chief standing in the back. He wasn't an electronics technician, but he said, did anybody check the power here? He went over and they checked the power on the ship, and the ship's power was wrong. And so when it plugged into the airplane, it affected all the equipment, my equipment. What did I know about shipboard life and that the power needs to be checked here and there? I just adjusted the equipment the way I knew from the bench on sea school. So what a challenge that is when all the pressure is on you to perform and you feel the whole world on your shoulders. But there's always somebody in the crowd ready to encourage, support, and help you through the storm. I think more recently the kind of challenges, as a chaplain, that I think memorial services are real tough for all of us. The chaplain gets in the middle of all that. On the Midway, when I was there, we had a horrible fire that killed 2 people, and that was a painful time for the whole ship. Probably even more recently, I got off of the Reagan, my first tour there, and the detailer says, time for shore duty. You're going to go to Arlington National Cemetery to bury the dead. And I said, yikes. Memorial services, those are so hard to do. Now you want me to go bury the dead all day long, full-time job, 4 to 5 a day. I resisted going there, but I went there, and it was the most inspirational position one could ever have. Burying what's called the greatest generation, World War II vets, Korean War vets. What an inspiration to hear their story and to see whose shoulders we stand on as we serve, these people who defended our freedom and our way of life. We're all part of this journey together. There at Arlington Cemetery, there was the honor guard. Maybe you've met some of them on the ship, these sailors that come right out of boot camp. They carry caskets all day long. And as we're waiting for the hearse to come up, I would always tell them who it is we're burying and kind of the story. Well, there was this EOD chief in Afghanistan who was supporting the Navy SEALs, and out ahead of them, finding out where the explosive devices were hidden. Well, he was killed. So I was telling the honor guard this story, and then we go through the burial of this young EOD chief. And they do their duty very solemnly. And at the end, we're going back to the bus, and there was this big, husky, young sailor, E3, tears streaming down his cheeks. And I walked up to him, I said, "Are you okay?" And he says, "I'm okay. It's just that I'm not worthy to have carried that casket." He did his duty on behalf of this fallen sailor, because we're in this together, this journey, discovering life, celebrating life, and discovering our place in a rather complicated, even conflicted world. A journey that we're on together.